My beloved child, something shifted behind closed doors when your name entered a conversation you were never supposed to hear. And what happened next was nothing like the reaction your soulmate expected. Stay with me, because the most surprising part is not that their family talked about you, it is what they quietly decided after hearing the full story. At first, the conversation seemed ordinary. A few questions. A few curious expressions. Someone wanted to understand why your soulmate had been acting differently lately, more thoughtful, more certain, almost as if their future had suddenly become clearer. Then your name was mentioned. The atmosphere changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But enough for everyone in that room to notice. Your soulmate did not immediately explain everything. And that silence made the family even more curious. One person finally asked, "What makes this person so important to you?" Your soulmate could have given a simple answer. They could have brushed the question aside. Instead, they began talking about the little things, the way thinking about you seems to bring clarity, the way your presence has influenced their decisions, and the strange feeling that meeting you was not simply another ordinary chapter. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Someone in the family had already noticed. Before your soulmate finished speaking, an older voice in the room quietly said that they had seen the difference too. They had watched your soulmate become more focused whenever your future was mentioned. They had noticed how conversations about tomorrow somehow kept circling back to you. Stay a little longer, because that observation changed the entire direction of the discussion. Suddenly, the family was no longer asking, "Who is this person?" They were asking something much bigger. What if this person is actually meant to remain part of your life? Your soulmate was caught completely off guard. They had prepared themselves to explain you. Perhaps even to defend why this connection mattered so much. But instead, the people around them began connecting pieces your soulmate had never put together aloud. One remembered a story your soulmate had shared about you weeks earlier. Another remembered how their expression changed whenever your name appeared. And someone else said something that made the room unusually quiet. Maybe we should stop treating this like a temporary connection. Don't skip what comes next, because this is where their secret conversation became a decision. The family began discussing the future. Not some distant, imaginary future. A future where you were no longer spoken about as someone standing outside their world. They started wondering what it would be like to actually know you. To understand your character for themselves instead of building opinions from fragments of stories. And your soulmate? They barely knew what to say. Because deep inside, they had been waiting for this shift without knowing whether it would ever arrive. But one family member still had a question. A question so simple that it changed everything again. They looked directly at your soulmate and asked, "If this person matters this much, why are you still hesitating?" Pause there. Because sometimes the most powerful realization does not arrive through a dramatic announcement. Sometimes another person simply asks the question you have been avoiding. Your soulmate suddenly had to confront something. Perhaps the uncertainty was never really about you. Perhaps it was about timing. About whether everyone else would understand. About whether bringing two different worlds together could actually work. And now, strangely, the very family they had worried about was beginning to remove that uncertainty. Something huge is waiting in the next layer of this conversation, because the family did not stop at accepting the possibility of you. They made a suggestion. One your soulmate never expected to hear. They decided it might finally be time to stop discussing you from a distance. Time to let reality answer the questions. Time to create an opportunity where everyone could understand why your soulmate keeps seeing something different in you. But there was one condition behind their decision, something they wanted your soulmate to do first. And when your soulmate heard it, they realized this secret family conversation might become the moment that changes what happens between you next. Now here is where the conversation took a direction even your soulmate could not predict. The family had already moved beyond curiosity, but they were not ready to make their final decision without hearing one thing directly from your soulmate. Stay a little longer, because the answer they received quietly changed the entire atmosphere. One family member leaned forward and asked, if everything became easier tomorrow, no uncertainty, no outside opinions, no complicated timing, would you still choose this person? Your soulmate did not answer immediately. Not because they were confused. Because the answer felt bigger when spoken aloud. For a moment, every explanation disappeared. Every question about timing, expectations, and what other people might think became irrelevant. There was only one truth left to consider: what did your soulmate genuinely want? And then they answered. Yes. I would. 3 simple words. But those words revealed something the family had been trying to understand throughout the entire conversation. Your soulmate was not fascinated by a passing possibility. They were emotionally invested in a future they had been quietly imagining for longer than anyone realized. Don't skip this turning point, because someone in that room responded in a way your soulmate never expected. Instead of challenging them, that person said, then maybe you need to stop waiting for the perfect moment. Silence. Your soulmate had expected questions. They had expected caution. They had even prepared themselves for disagreement. What they had not prepared for was encouragement. And suddenly, the family discussion became less about whether you belonged in your soulmate's future and more about whether your soulmate had the courage to make their intentions clear. Think about that. What if the biggest obstacle was never the family? What if your soulmate had spent so much time imagining how others might react that they never noticed something important? The people around them were already seeing how deeply this connection had affected them. Then came the decision promised from the beginning. The family suggested that your soulmate should stop keeping you as a mysterious name mentioned in private conversations. They wanted the possibility of meeting you, speaking with you, and understanding you without assumptions. But there was something surprisingly thoughtful behind that decision. They did not want your soulmate to rush you. They did not want some enormous announcement. They simply wanted honesty. One person said, before anything else happens, make sure they know where you truly stand. That sentence stayed with your soulmate. Because suddenly the next move belonged to them. And this is where everything becomes interesting. Your soulmate began wondering what they would actually say to you if they stopped filtering themselves. Would they tell you how many conversations somehow returned to your name? Would they admit that their family now knows you matter? Would they finally explain why they sometimes seemed close one moment and uncertain the next? There was more underneath that hesitation than you realized. Stay till the end, because the family noticed it too. Someone asked your soulmate one final question. Are you afraid they don't feel the same? Your soulmate looked away. And that reaction answered more than words could. For the first time, the family understood that beneath all the confidence was one quiet uncertainty. your soulmate did not know whether opening this door would bring you closer or reveal that they had waited too long. That is why their next suggestion surprised them even more. Don't predict their answer. Give them the chance to answer for themselves. Something changed inside your soulmate when they heard that. The future suddenly stopped looking like something they had to completely figure out before taking the first step. Maybe they only needed to be clear. Maybe you deserved to know what had been happening behind the scenes. And if this message feels meaningful to you, you can share it with someone who enjoys these deeper stories, leave a comment about the part that stood out to you, and subscribe so we can continue exploring moments like this together. But before you go, hear this. The family conversation was still not finished. Because just when your soulmate thought the biggest decision had already been made, someone who had remained unusually quiet throughout the discussion finally spoke. And what they revealed showed that your family connection had been noticed much earlier than your soulmate ever imagined. They knew something about you. Something your soulmate had never told them. And once that truth entered the conversation, the family's decision became even more surprising. Then the quietest person in the room finally spoke, and suddenly, everyone realized this conversation had started long before that evening. Your soulmate turned toward them, confused, because what they were about to reveal could not have come from anything your soulmate had recently shared. I already knew this person was important to you. That sentence stopped everything. Your soulmate immediately asked how. The answer was surprisingly simple. They had noticed patterns. Whenever conversations about the future became serious, your soulmate became careful with their words. Whenever relationships were casually mentioned, they never seemed interested in discussing possibilities, until your name appeared. And whenever someone questioned what your soulmate truly wanted from life, there was always one particular expression on their face. The family member had connected those pieces quietly. But there was more. Stay with this moment, because the next observation changed the meaning of the entire family discussion. They said, "You don't talk about this person the way you talk about everyone else." Your soulmate became silent. Because it was true. When they spoke about you, they remembered details. Small conversations. Things you probably assumed had been forgotten. The way you responded to certain moments. The values you seemed to carry. The sense of possibility that appeared whenever your soulmate imagined what life might look like if both of you stopped standing on opposite sides of uncertainty. And then came the surprising revelation. The family had not secretly gathered to convince your soulmate to walk away from you. They had gathered because they wanted clarity. They wanted to know whether you represented a temporary emotion, or whether your soulmate was genuinely thinking about building something meaningful. Now they had their answer. But don't move away from this story yet, because their final decision was different from anything your soulmate had imagined. One person said, "If you are serious, then we should not become another reason for you to hesitate." Your soulmate looked up. Another agreed. Then another. The room that had once felt like a place where your soulmate might have to explain everything suddenly became the place where an invisible barrier began disappearing. Nobody was promising what the future would become. Nobody was trying to control your decision. Instead, the family made a surprisingly mature choice. They would give this connection room to reveal what it truly was. No unnecessary assumptions. No deciding your character before knowing you. No forcing your soulmate toward a different path simply because it seemed easier. And most importantly, they wanted your soulmate to speak honestly with you before imagining the ending. That was the decision. But something even deeper happened afterward. Your soulmate realized they had spent so much energy wondering whether their family would understand you that they had overlooked the question that mattered most. Would they finally allow you to understand them? Pause there. Because that question followed your soulmate after the conversation ended. They imagined talking to you without hiding behind vague words. They imagined admitting that your name had entered conversations about their future. They imagined telling you that the family reaction they had once worried about was not what happened at all. And suddenly, hesitation started feeling heavier than honesty. Before you go, hear this line carefully. Sometimes the turning point is not when everyone around you finally understands your connection. It is when two people stop allowing imagined outcomes to speak louder than an honest conversation. Your soulmate walked away from that family discussion carrying one clear message. Stop guessing. Start communicating. Let the truth reveal what comes next. And somewhere inside them, a decision was beginning to form. Not a dramatic promise. Not a perfect prediction. Something much more meaningful. The decision to stop treating you like an unanswered question. Because after everything their family said, your soulmate understood one thing differently now. Perhaps the next chapter does not begin with their family deciding whether you belong. Perhaps it begins when your soulmate finally gives you the opportunity to decide what this connection means to you. But the story did not end when your soulmate walked away from that room. Because one family member followed them and said something that completely reframed everything they had just heard. There is one more thing you need to understand. Your soulmate stopped. Something in those words felt different. Stay a little longer, because this was not another opinion about you. It was a realization about your soulmate themselves. The family member looked at them and said, "You keep waiting for certainty before you speak, but sometimes certainty comes after two people finally speak honestly." That landed differently. Your soulmate had spent so much time trying to predict your reaction that they had accidentally created an entire future inside their imagination. One version where you understood everything immediately. Another where the timing felt wrong. Another where too much had been left unsaid. But none of those futures were real yet. They were possibilities. And suddenly your soulmate understood why the family's decision mattered so much. They were not giving permission. This was never about permission. They were giving perspective. Don't skip this part, because what happened next revealed how deeply the conversation had affected them. Your soulmate asked, "What if I tell them everything and things change?" The response came almost immediately. Things are already changing. Your soulmate froze. Because it was true. Silence had changed things. Waiting had changed things. Unspoken expectations had changed things. Even this secret family conversation had changed something. The question was no longer whether change would arrive. The question was whether your soulmate would participate honestly in whatever came next. And then that family member revealed something else. During the earlier conversation, when everyone had discussed meeting you someday, nobody had asked whether you would impress them. Instead, someone had said, "I hope they feel comfortable around us." That surprised your soulmate more than almost anything else. Because suddenly the picture looked completely different. The family was not imagining an examination. They were imagining a welcome. Not because they believed they already knew everything about you, but because they wanted the chance to discover the person behind the stories your soulmate had been telling. Wait until you hear what your soulmate realized next. For months, they may have been standing in front of a door that was never actually locked. They simply had not tried opening it. And now the family had quietly stepped aside. The next decision belonged to your soulmate. Would they continue communicating through hints, distance, and carefully protected emotions? Or would they finally say something real? Your soulmate started mentally forming the conversation. Not some perfect speech. Just honesty. I need you to know something. Even imagining those words made everything feel more real. Because once spoken, there would be no need to keep wondering whether you understood your importance in their life. Something huge was no longer waiting somewhere far in the future. It was hiding inside one conversation. One moment of clarity. One decision to stop assuming and start listening. And if you have stayed this far, you are part of what makes these stories meaningful. You can share this with someone who enjoys messages about connection and personal growth. Leave your perspective in the comments, and subscribe if you want to continue this journey when the next chapter arrives. Now stay for this final turn. Before your soulmate left, the family member said one last thing. When you speak to them, don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Tell them what is true. That sentence followed your soulmate into the quiet. Because suddenly they understood. The family's surprising decision was never simply, "We accept this person." It was deeper. "We will not stand in the way of you discovering what this connection can genuinely become." And for your soulmate, that changed everything. Now there was nowhere left to hide behind imagined resistance. No family argument to blame. No invisible wall. Only two people, two perspectives, and a truth that still needed to be spoken. But here is the part nobody in that family knew yet. Your soulmate had already been thinking about how to reach you. And after this conversation, they began reconsidering something they had previously decided not to say. Something personal. Something that could finally explain why they had hesitated for so long. And if they choose to reveal it, you may finally understand that their silence was never as simple as it appeared. And just when it seemed every hidden piece had finally surfaced, your soulmate remembered one detail they had deliberately kept out of the family conversation. Not because it was wrong, and not because they wanted to mislead anyone. They simply had not found the courage to put it into words yet. But now, after everything their family had decided, that unspoken truth felt impossible to ignore. Your soulmate had imagined a real future with you. Not once. More than once. Quiet moments. Ordinary days. Conversations where neither of you needed to guess what the other person meant. They had wondered what it would feel like if this connection stopped living in possibilities and finally became something both of you could understand clearly. And that was exactly why they had hesitated. Stay with me, because this changes the meaning of everything that came before. Sometimes hesitation does not mean someone feels nothing. Sometimes a possibility matters so much that a person becomes careful with every move. Your soulmate knew that once they spoke honestly, the connection could no longer remain safely undefined. You would have the opportunity to respond. To ask questions. To reveal your own perspective. And that uncertainty had kept them standing still. Until now. After the family conversation, your soulmate began seeing the situation differently. They